If you want Colts talk all year long, you're in the right place.
Fires it upfield, caught over the middle. Michael Pittman Jr., there he goes! He's at the 40, he's at the 30, slips out of a tackle, 20, 10, 5, touchdown! Michael Pittman Jr. takes it 75 yards to the house. Big run, angling left, 40, he's at the 30, down the near sideline, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor, a 49-yard gallop to pay dirt.
In the Indiana Union Construction Industry radio studio, let's get the podcast started.
Welcome to the OCP, the official Colts podcast, the living room, joined week in and week out by Miss Larra Overton, Mr. JJ Stankevitz. I'm Jeffrey Gorman. Guys, a lot to go over what we're going to be talking about this upcoming the OTA period, the rookie minicamp coming up. But I've got to go to some pressing breaking news that you and I really have to get some info on, and that involves you, Miss Larra Overton, who is our official representative. She covers the Kentucky Derby for the official Colts podcast, and you were down
correspondent,
there.
Derby
Yes, correspondent. And a couple of fun facts I want to start off with. 150,000 hot dogs were served at the Kentucky Derby, and 120,000 mint juleps.
Really?
Were at that was I did a little fun fact research on that.
So wait a minute.
That's the
I
question.
heard on the last word that Matt Taylor is a former mint julep vendor.
Yeah, how about
He
that?
is.
How about that?
And there was a story that he said he would tell off recording that I need to know it now.
It is. He did tell me it
Yes.
off recording.
It's
I
great.
wish I could tell on recording, but it's kind of fun. And I'll just say this. He was in college. You know, it was that sort of mentality when he was down there.
Well, it was
but-
part of the Franklin football program, and if you worked, it would help cover your costs of certain things, the essentials. But then anything that you got, like tip-wise, you were free to take home. And so he went to the very top and was making sure he had everybody covered, and they were very grateful.
He had some good connections. Let's just
good
say
connections.
That about there. Speaking of good connections, I just saw the pictures. Absolutely stunning. The
Thanks.
family down there. Love the pictures. You guys are outside the Twin Spires and everything. But I need to find out, like, when you go to the Kentucky Derby, what time are you really saying, okay, I am gussied up, I'm looking good.
It's a great
and
question.
I'll have the first either mint julep or whatever
I was
it
trying
is.
to figure this out. This has to be maybe my 10th or my 12th Derby in some capacity. And this was the third that Dan and I have done together with my family. So it's fun now that he is part of this, tradition, and he's been kind of ingrained into the whole thing. But we left our house about 9:30, my parents' house about 9:30, grabbed my sister and brother-in-law. We were at a place on the backside of Churchill Downs having breakfast where all of the trainers tend to go beforehand.
How long was the wait?
Oh, we walked right in.
Wow.
Wagner's Pharmacy. It is an icon. It's an establishment right there on the backside of the track. So we had breakfast there. So we had, just your staples, and then rolled right in. And I don't know, maybe 11. We were kind of everybody's
Officially,
getting their
it was
first.
on.
Yeah.
And you got 8 hours because the race didn't go
Sure.
up till 7 o'clock.
Right.
So everybody has to pace themselves.
You really do.
And we got a couple of questions. JJ brought up a good one. I'm going to leave that for you.
Okay,
Obviously,
good.
the horse winner. Go for it, because I've been dying to ask her on this one. And just for a fun fact, the horse that I gave LO on Friday, one of the few horses that I may or may not have had put a little interest in, finished dead last.
There you go.
Dead last. So that was my...
Do you get you finish dead last in like a fantasy football league?
Yeah, right,
you have to do some challenge.
I feel like
you can
it,
eat a
yeah.
Waffle House because your horse finished last.
Bro, on Friday, I was like, this is a good pony
Yeah.
right here. I mean, this thing's going to make a move
That's
dead
what
last.
makes the
Okay.
Derby so interesting.
So
Anything
thank
can
you for
happen.
saving this question
Yes.
for me. Did Mystic Dan Tucker win anything on
did.
Mystic Dan?
Oh, I
He did.
love it.
There we go.
So
There we go.
he likes to get involved in some bets. So my brother-in-law, who I also grew up with, he and I have been friends since we were in like the 7th grade. He married my sister. Obviously, that's how he'd be my brother-in-law. But he's a really good handicapper. My dad has been handicapping his entire life. So they will bet in a group together. The boys kind of have these bets that they have all together. And so, yeah, they got like it was a combination of sorts. I don't know if it was an exacta or a try that they hit, but yeah, they did okay. Could not have been a better finish. I mean, in terms of all of the races that I've been a part of and witnessed, the most phenomenal finish. The weather was amazing. We had so much fun being there with the 150th. It was absolutely amazing.
That was, well, really quick, how are the feet? Because, I mean, you look stunning and everything, but it's a long day.
Well,
you got the heels on.
And you have to walk quite a bit.
Sure.
So late in the day, I took the heels off when we were walking out and threw flats on to do the walkout.
Wonderful. That's a
pro
move.
tip right there.
Veteran move. Correspondent from the Derby. You've never been, correct?
No, never been to the Derby.
When will you go? This is a short drive down to
It
Louisville
is.
now.
At some point.
Yeah?
I'm going to go at some point. I don't know when. Probably not soon.
Interest in horse racing or interest in the party around
The event.
horse?
I watch one horse race a year, and that's if I'm in front of a TV for the Kentucky Derby. Like, it's cool.
it. Okay.
It was a heck of a race to watch this year. But I only watched it. My wife and I went out to Chiba in Westfield.
Love
and
Chiba.
that was great. We were leaving, and we both went to like use the bathroom before we left. And I was like, oh, hey, there's the Derby. And it was like halfway through. I was like, oh, great. Watched the end, and it was
Okay,
awesome.
couple of things.
So that's where I'm at with the Derby.
The new paddock area at Churchill Downs.
Oh, it's like $200 million.
It is
What did that?
incredible.
Good
I mean, it's
gosh.
absolutely stunning. Here's what I will say. If you are someone who is in driving distance, if you're in, central Indiana or, somewhere within proximity to Louisville and you want the Derby experience, but obviously, like, it's a lot to do Derby Day. The Thursday before Derby is what they call Thurby. Huge party. It is a blast. Oaks Day
Big
is
one.
the Friday before. Those are also days that are within the week of the Derby that you get so much of just the aura and the mystique, and it's part of the entire week without necessarily doing the full tilt Derby. That's a good kind of gateway into it all to get the experience. It's also nicer to go in and see it when it's not as jam-packed as it is on Derby Day, and you can move around a little bit more. Tickets are a little easier to come by, all of those things. So that's a good way to go if you're looking to kind of be a part of it, but maybe you're not like, okay, I'm going gung-ho all the way in on Derby Day.
It's pretty good because, I mean, we've talked about this before, and we'll move on to football, but between the Kentucky Derby right down the way and between the Indy 500, those specific, unique sporting events, we're kind of lucky. I mean, we're kind of lucky. We're an hour and a half, 2-hour drive down to Louisville, and if you want to go to the race, the 500, tickets are available.
Where
Like,
else
you can go to
in the
these
country
things.
do you want to be for the month of May than right here?
Right. I'm saying, I'm getting to that.
I have this is a little teaser. So, I've been working on that podcast on how the Colts
Sure, The
moved
Move.
here. It's called
Yeah.
The Move. It's going to debut this summer. But the second episode is all about how Indianapolis got the Colts and how they set themselves up to get it. And I talked with Bill Benner, who's a longtime reporter for the Indy Star, now is with the Pacers. And he posed this thing to me that I've been thinking about so much, about Louisville and Indianapolis in the 1960s. Similar in size. Indy may have maybe 100,000 more people than Louisville, but they were both big college basketball towns, one-event towns with the 500 in the Derby, and they both had an ABA team, the Louisville Colonels and the Indiana Pacers. And Indianapolis invested in sports. Louisville didn't. Louisville, still a great city for horse racing, for college basketball, not much else.
Wow.
Indianapolis, we got the Colts, we got the Pacers. We have invested in sports here, and look at how our city has grown.
Shout out to Mayor Hudnut for building the dome.
Hey,
right?
thank you,
That's
Mayor.
Shout out Mayors Luger and Hudnut.
Yeah, really.
For
Yeah.
everything they did to set us
Tricky
up
Dick
here.
Luger, that's what they
Yeah,
called him. But he
yeah.
did the deal here.
Yeah.
Hey, hats off, man. I'm just telling you, that's what they call him sometimes. But a lot to get into. We have rookies coming in this week. Rookie mini camp is coming in. Just give me a once-over of what the schedule looks like
Yeah.
and what these guys are going to get familiar with.
So rookies will get in, I believe, Thursday to Indianapolis. They'll kind of have some, orientation type stuff, get their jerseys, and then Friday got practice. Friday, Saturday out here at the facility. I think there might be a little bit on Sunday too. A lot of Rookie Academy
Yeah.
that David Thornton runs, does a great job with that. It's really important to
It's a
get
lot
these
of classroom
kids.
work for them.
Yeah, a lot of classroom work,
They're getting the playbook. They're meeting with all of their, all of the respective position group coaches, who they've probably met with at some part, throughout the process.
Yeah.
But, in addition to the draft picks, you're going to have undrafted rookies in the mix as well. So there'll be some brand new faces in there and be an interesting opportunity to start evaluating some of those guys, because obviously, the Colts are one of those teams who had such a long stretch of having an undrafted guy, make the roster for so long, that is always a compelling group of prospects to be able to evaluate.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend just of setting that floor for these guys to now start building on.
And
for
not being
OTAs.
funny, but find out where the lunchroom is and find out where the showers are. I mean, literally walk through and find out where their their day-to-day is.
Yeah, I remember last year being around here and everyone was like, I'm looking for the meeting room.
Right,
and I'm
right,
like,
right.
yeah, gotcha. It is. It's kind of like the first day of school.
A fun fact, the media, they'll have media availability
Yeah.
on this, and you will hear definitely from these two talking to some of the rookies. Just give me who you're looking forward to sitting down with.
Oh, man. There are a lot of them. I'm really interested in A.D. Mitchell, and now like that he knows where he's going to be, knows who he's going to be playing with, working with, all of those things, just, his motivation coming in, especially now that, the initial wave of emotions post-draft of, okay, maybe I've got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. This was such a wide receiver heavy draft. I feel like I have something to prove, right? And now what that looks like to him, what type of impact he can make now, thinking about, okay, I'm working with Anthony Richardson and in complement to Pittman and Pierce and Downs and Doolin and all of these guys. So that's one for sure that I think is going to be really interesting in terms of how quickly when they start working out with the veteran guys, where you see him, in that type of rotation.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the other wide receiver the Colts took, Anthony Gould, and how he looks just in terms of his quickness. If you look at his 40 time, it's really good. I think it was a 4.39. But his 10-yard split, so just the acceleration part of it.
He can fly.
He can fly. It was 1.49 seconds. I think that's 95th or 96th percentile. So he's quick and he's got long speed, which is going to be interesting to see how that might play out on kick returns.
Hey, on Twitter X, at JJ Stankevitz, at Larra Overton, you're going to hear from the rookies coming up. These two will be on spot both Friday and Saturday. And, of course, Colts.com has all of the latest information. Let's get to what we're sitting down to talk a little bit about. I kind of like this about this because it's not a discussion about the rookies, even though the rookies are going to have an impact. It's not second-year guys. It's not third-year guys. It's veterans and what they're going to bring into this playoff caliber team and who you're looking forward to. JJ, I want to start with you on this thing. We're talking about a Colts playoff team, the way that this roster is set up right now. Who are some of the guys, not even background guys, that you're looking forward to? I mean, we can start at the top, obviously, with the quarterback, but guys that are going to be vital in this team making the playoffs.
Let's start with Jonathan Taylor, because the Colts are putting a lot behind Jonathan Taylor this season. We've heard every time Chris Ballard's had a chance to talk about it, it's been, hey, Jonathan Taylor, we think he's in for a big year. The Colts, in addressing their explosiveness on offense, which was a little bit lacking last year, believe that combination of Jonathan Taylor with Anthony Richardson will lead to a more explosive offense, whether that's in the run game, which we know Jonathan Taylor can be one of the most explosive backs in the NFL, or just in the pass game, where if you start loading up on Richardson and Taylor, that can create more opportunities on the outside for a guy like A.D. Mitchell and Alec Pierce. Maybe that leads to more yak opportunities for a Michael Pittman Jr., a Josh Downs. If you don't have as many bodies back deep to defend those guys. But it all is going to start with Jonathan Taylor putting together a really good, impactful season. And for JT, we've seen it, but we haven't seen the consistency of it for the last couple of years. Now, that hasn't all been his fault. 2022, that offense was broken, to say the least. So his numbers maybe went down a little bit that year. He dealt with some injury stuff then. 2023, he dealt with the injury stuff, with the contract stuff. He got, just when it looked like he was starting to ascend and kind of get back to being JT in the middle of the season, has the thumb issue, comes back. That last game against Houston should be seared in everyone's minds in what he can do in terms of explosiveness on the field. But that's the kind of Jonathan Taylor the Colts need to see this year, I think, for this offense to really click the way that they want it to.
One note on explosiveness. There is a stat that I came across just recently, and this is a perfect opportunity to utilize it. But are you guys aware that if you look at last year, only 2 NFL wide receivers were in the top 10 in all 3 of these explosive categories? Amari Cooper, Alec Pierce. Top 10 explosive stats from wide receivers. Yards per catch, deep ball catch percentage rate, effectiveness, and DPI yards.
And he was sort of, and in a limited sort of offering, if you will, for a wide receiver with the year that Alec Pierce had. I'm glad that you guys brought him up. In sticking with this theme, I think he is vital, and I use that word a lot on this segment, if you will, but I think Alec Pierce is vital for this offense. Number one, because of injuries in this stinking league. And I'm sorry, we don't want to talk about the negatives and stuff, but injuries happen. Injuries happen in camp, during the season, whatever. And I think the roster of wide receivers is so vital for this young quarterback. And everybody's saying, hey, you got Pittman here, you got Downs. We saw what he did with 700-plus yards. And, of course, we got the rookie and A.D. Mitchell. But it's the Alec Pierce that I'm putting a lot of weight on to say, hey, I've been around here. I'm going in.
And he's shown it.
You know what I'm saying? I've got the burst. Hey, I'll be the quiet guy. I'll play it, and it'll get some heavy snaps this year. He's one guy that I'm going to say is going to have a hell of a year, not going to be quiet, but he's going to show up and do his thing, and there's that's our second rounder that we got right there, and he's enhancing this wide receiver rooms for depth purposes.
And such a good compliment to Pittman, and what he gives you more inside, right, and all of that.
I mean, we're all excited about A.D. Mitchell, but, A.D. Mitchell's going to have to earn it against Alec Pierce at that X receiver position. And an offense that's maybe a little bit more tailored to what Alec does well. Where the Colts last year, when Richardson went out, were not a team that pushed the ball downfield all that much. That was just not what Gardner Minshew is kind of in his DNA. Anthony Richardson, it isn't his DNA. You think about the guy who was on the receiving end of that unbelievable play where Aaron Donald had AR wrapped up. It was Alec Pierce who went up and won a one-on-one while he was getting interfered with. That's the kind of play you can get out of Alec Pierce if you have an offense that's going to give him more of those opportunities.
I mean, and you even just think about the Tennessee game with Gardner, right?
Right.
Where
they finally schemed up some stuff downfield, and it was like, ooh, there it is.
There it is,
yeah.
right.
Yep.
And it's a different cat now.
And you see that Tennessee DB just grabbing, and he's ripping Alec's shirt off from behind, just trying to get a hand on him.
And
by the way, the obvious guy in all this is Anthony Richardson, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of the returning player.
That's almost unsaid, right? Do we even
so,
have to say
I don't
that
want
at
it
this
to sound like we're just glossing over it,
No.
but we have a lot of time to talk about Anthony. We have talked a lot about Anthony. Let's talk about some other guys here and I think AP is a really good one to kind of highlight.
Tight ends. I want to mix them in a little bit. Hello. When you look at that room, Woods coming off an injury and, established guy that shows big play. Ogletree, same thing. Big playability. You got a young guy like Will Mallory in there. A crowded room right there as far as it goes. But, again, we talk about enhancing Anthony Richardson. I'm going to start with you, Elo, in this room. What are we looking for from our tight ends this year, and who exactly? JJ, I'm going to even ask you after Elo, how many are we keeping this year overall?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Tom Manning, I think, is one of those position group coaches who should get so much credit because he is phenomenal with the work he does with that group. I feel like that we've spread the love to so many of the different, position group coaches. Tom is just absolutely phenomenal with developing that group and what you saw that they were able to do with the rotation of tight ends last year. To me, it's Jelani Woods. We have no idea what Jelani Woods with Anthony Richardson looks like because of the injuries that Jelani battled through all of last season and then obviously the injury to Anthony. So I think Jelani's a guy you invested a draft pick in, right? You've got to see it. And we saw it in his rookie season, right? With the game-winning touchdowns that he was able to have. It's so compelling, and it's just all about he has to stay healthy. I think, Mo has continued to just kind of steadily progress, especially last year as a blocker in this offense and what he was able to give you. You've got to see it. You've got to see Jelani stay healthy, and I think that when you get to vet minicamp in June, a lot of eyes are going to be on that position and on him with exactly what that looks like. I do think that it was really encouraging what you saw from Will Mallory late in the season, thrust into tough situations, and what that element he brought. And then you kind of look at a lot of those guys. I mean, Kylan is completely different from really the rest of what those guys give you at that position. So what are you doing? What other aspect does he bring in complement to some of those guys? A little bit of, a hybrid between what you get out of the wide receiver group and your tight end group. I was bringing up this argument the other day. Is it funny that when you look at our group of tight ends, the majority of them were not tight ends to start out? Will Mallory really the only one, because you look, Mo played college basketball, didn't start playing football until he came into the league. Jelani was a quarterback to start his college career. Drew Ogletree was a receiver. Kylan Granson was a receiver. And these guys have all kind of been converted into the position. So the ceiling is incredibly high for a lot of those guys still trying to master playing this position in the NFL within this offense.
I think the question I have about the tight ends is, and like you mentioned, Jeffrey, how many get kept? But does anyone develop into that, like, number one guy?
Yes.
Because right now the Colts have a bunch of good players in that room who collectively, if you look at some of the numbers they had last year, they were like third in explosive play rate among tight ends if you take everyone.
Right.
But individually, there was no one who ranked in the top 15 or 20. I think that's okay, but I do think you want to see, if ideally you kind of get that Dallas Goedert, that Shane had in Philly.
What this offense looked like with, like, Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle.
Right,
Like
yes.
that tandem, how threatening that was. Like, that 2018 year that Ebron had with Luck, oh my God.
Yeah. Now, it's not a like dead on, you have to have this thing. You like to have production out of your tight ends regardless how you get it, but does someone maybe ascend to that level where it's like, all right, this guy's kind of our clear-cut, bona fide number one tight end in that room? Because if not, I mean, I think
Do you see that happening? Is that player developed in training camp? Do we find that when it comes out?
Tight end development takes long.
Also,
It's not a microwavable process. It kind of, you see a lot of guys emerge in year 3 and year 4, even into year 5 of their NFL careers. So it's not like, because none of these guys have maybe done it yet, doesn't mean that it's not in them. They can't do it. So we'll see.
Also, not every team has one. I mean, how many true of those type of tight ends like you're talking about? Obviously, you've got Kelsey and Kittle and Goddard, those type of guys. You think about Zach Ertz from a few years ago, even. Like, how many of those are there in the league?
Rare.
10, 15?
You're right.
No, I don't even know about 15.
Maybe
I think
10.
it's probably, you count on 2 hands how many there are.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, those guys have talent, and if one of them could make that jump, that doesn't, again, this isn't like a make or break thing, but if you can get that, I think that's better than the sort of spread out. But the spread out thing works if that's what you got. And we saw Shane use that kind of spread the ball thing, all those seam balls to, Mallory and Ogletree and those guys, where it's just like Anthony Richardson or Gardner got the ball and bam, that guy's wide open 15 yards downfield, just get him the ball. Those type of routes are really valuable.
My Indiana is showing so bad because every time when you said Dallas Goedert and when I had to say it, I have to say not Dallas Clark. Like, because I just defaulted. I mean, it's like, right? You're talking about every time.
Only so many Dallases. I know I do. There's a Dallas Taylor. Rest in peace.
Dallas Flowers.
I would call Dallas Taylor rest in peace again. A guy I knew from L.A. Dallas Clark all the time.
Oh, would you really?
Yeah. So
hey, I just had a transition here to talk about some other guys.
Yeah.
Who the Colts are going to count on. How about Dallas Flowers?
Yeah. There you go.
And he's in that bucket with Jalen Jones.
He's an
and
IS,
Brents.
Dallas.
He is
we need
an
to
IS.
clarify. That's a DALOIS.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We got you, Dallas.
Correct. But those corners are kind of in that bucket where the Colts have said, hey, last year we liked the experience you got. We liked some of the stuff you did. It needs to be more consistent, and you need to be more available. But we are not going to go splash for a corner. We are not going to.
Does that mean no veteran brought in from here on out?
I mean, that could still happen, but I'm not so sure that it does. And so I pulled this up today. I was doing an article on Tuesday. Just Kenny Moore and Gus Bradley last week kind of talked about the corners and why they're confident in them. Juju Brents last year in man coverage. This is something Rick Venturi's talked a lot about, how the Colts need to maybe play a little bit more man with their corners. Well, Juju Brents last year had a Pro Football Focus coverage grade in man coverage of 90.8. That was the second highest in the NFL, in a group that included Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley, who were below him. So you've got some talented guys in this group. Juju, I kind of view Juju almost as like defensive Anthony Richardson, where we saw the flashes from him. It needs to be more consistent, but the big thing with him is he's got to stay healthy. If Juju can find a way to stay healthy, even in that small sample size of last year, I saw a lot from him that makes me believe he can be a good corner in the NFL.
He didn't I want to be careful how I say this. He didn't get the opportunity to play man as much as maybe he will this year. Is that an accurate statement? They played something like 78 or 82% zone last year, I'm saying. So,
yeah.
like his resume on that will be a small sample size. Am I accurate on that?
I think you can earn more of those within the defense as it goes on. Because to play man coverage, they got to trust you.
Right.
That has to be a high level of trust to be
and hopefully
manned
builds
up.
In there, yeah.
But you think about the PBU that Brent's had in the end zone on Devontae Adams, where he was manned up one-on-one against the best receiver in the NFL, maybe one of the best, and he got his head around, he swatted the ball away, he was in tight coverage, it was a great play. That's the kind of upside that Juju has. And you're right, it's not like you're going to play a ton of man, but even the guys who play the most man in the NFL they're still playing zone probably more than half the time. It's not necessarily
just the way the game is.
Yeah, it's just the way the game is. Yeah, right.
Hello, you had a great sit down with Jordan Rodrigue from The Athletic, talking about Laiatu Latu and his development. We're going to hear from that in a minute, but another segue. The addition, not the addition, but the extension that we saw for Kwity Paye and what he means to this
the
defensive.
fifth-year option, yeah.
Yeah, what he means to this defensive line room. They showed what he means by paying this young man $13.5 million. Now you've got, everybody's talking about the new kid on the block, Laiatu, obviously coming in here. How do you think that will, their friendship, which is, even off the Colts football field, how he's going to help the rookie in this year, his first year in the NFL, and we're talking about the fifth year.
I'll tell you, actually.
Kwity.
So as soon as Latu was drafted, I figured out that Kwity had trained with him with Coach Ed. Coach Ed is a defensive line pass rush coach out in LA who trains a ton of NFL guys, a few collegians in there as well. So Kwity has known Latu for a while. So texted him. He said, elite pass rush, ability to win games with our room alone, becoming the best D-line in the NFL.
That's from Kwity Paye, huh?
That is the endorsement. That is the endorsement. Yes.
Wow.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
It doesn't get much better than that.
That
and
is
when
great.
I had Latu for our one-on-one, for our sit-down, I brought that up. And he was just so overwhelmed, with that endorsement, what that meant to him. And he talked about how excited he is to play with, not only the defensive line, but when he was leaving the draft, he ran into Zaire Franklin in the hotel. And Z had a chance to say, hey, can't wait to get you excited, fired up to have you and all that.
Great,
and he was like, oh my God, he was almost not starstruck in that way, but still just kind of a little bit overwhelmed at Zaire was coming up to him and, reaching out to him and welcoming him to the team and how excited he was. I said, yeah, if there's a pretty good guy to set the tone of what to expect for the defense, you met the right guy.
Right,
If Zaire Franklin's the first guy post draft that you're seeing as you're headed to Indy. But
big year for Kwity?
Yeah. Okay, big year as in
important, valuable member of this defense year for Kwity.
I think it was I want to get this right, so sorry if I don't, but I think it was Zach Hicks on Twitter. He had a point that was in our culture where it's you're either, if you're a first-round pick, you're either a superstar or you're a bust. Kwity Paye he's a good football player. He defends the run really well. He's got some pass rushing juice, but he hasn't had a double-digit sack season. So some people might be like, well, why'd you pick up his fifth-year option? He's not that good. There are other things that he does that are so vital to this defense. Yeah. He pushes the pocket as kind of that power guy at defensive end. But Kwity's he's a good football player. There is a lot of value in being a good football player. And it's against the run, it's against the pass. Picking up his fifth-year option made a ton of sense. And
he's also been really available.
Right. The last year especially, he really increased his availability. But I think, and Chris Ballard said we think there's, a little more in there. Gus Bradley said we think there's a little more in there. Some defensive ends, they develop on different timelines, and Kwity going into year 4 could see another jump in his sack production. I think you want to see a jump in his pressure production. But if Kwity is who he was last year, again this year, there is no problem with that. That's a good football player, an important part of your defense, and a guy who you trust on every single snap that he's out there.
You've also had quite a bit of rotation among defensive line coaches since Kwity has been in the building. And now most recently, that's going to be Charlie Partridge. And especially coming from the collegiate coaching background of how he developed players there, I think is going to be an incredible asset to this room that has already proven itself. They set the franchise record
51,
in sacks last year, right? And now there is, Charlie coming in who really is going to be able to bring another element in complement to everything that these guys have done so far. I'm intrigued by what Charlie can do with the guys he inherits as part of that position group, Kwity included, because I think Kwity is one who really prides himself on honing his craft, developing that skill set, implementing new moves into, his game. So that's an interesting caveat too to the production of the defensive line, not just with, Kwity and now having that, obviously extension or that 5th-year option and Latu and all of those things, but Charlie's going to be significant. I think that's one of the more underscored headlines and things to watch as you go into training camp.
Another rookie that a lot of eyes will be on is Charlie Partridge. I mean, let's be honest here. He's coming from a storied collegiate career and coming up to the big time.
Yeah,
now.
I mean, the Colts are putting a lot of emphasis, as they do with Gus Bradley, on getting home with 4 and rushing 4. So that defensive line has to be humming on every single snap. The kind of like we talked about where, the Colts set the Indianapolis era franchise sack record last year, but the pressure didn't match it, essentially. The pressure rate didn't match it. So you want to keep that sack production where it was, but get the pressure rate up and consistently affect the quarterback more often. You think about that Week 18 game where C.J. Stroud did have time to operate in the pocket, and there were a lot of plays where it was 3rd down and the Colts didn't get pressure on him. That's what you got to change. Even if it's not getting, 51 sacks is a lot. I think I don't know if you're thinking about getting more than 51 sacks, but you want to get pressure on a higher percentage of your snaps.
Well,
also, speaking about rookies coming in, how fun is it that Matt Goncalves, the offensive lineman, was opposite Charlie Partridge? He was going to battle with all of Charlie's guys at Pitt when Charlie was coaching. Pretty good intel,
resource,
right?
Because Matt Gonzalez also only played 3 games last year, but hey, Charlie Partridge saw him every day in that building, so pretty good resource there.
Hey, I tell you what, Charlie's going to have a big impact on Laiatu, Kwity Paye, and the rest of that defensive lineman. But you sat down with Jordan Rodrigue, who wrote a fantastic story.
This is a great article.
Fantastic story on Latu. And just give me a once-over real quick, what you found out after talking to this thing you didn't know before.
Yeah, so Jordan, incredible NFL writer for The Athletic, had an opportunity which she explains how this story came to be in complement to a lot of the other work that she has been doing, but some really incredible insight as to his motivation to not just make it to the NFL, but to be great in the NFL, and exactly maybe what not only the Indianapolis Colts scouts and front office saw in him, but the compliment that he will be, and her experience in covering some really great pass rushers, what she sees as being indications that he has everything that it takes to be one of those impact guys and immediate impact guys for this franchise.
Good job by you. Let's sit down now. Here's Jordan Rodrigue and Larra Overton talking about Laiatu Latu.
So delighted to be joined by the fabulous, the incredibly talented Jordan Rodrigue of The Athletic, who I admittedly fangirled wholeheartedly at the Combine. I don't get a chance to see you very often, and Colts fans may not be as familiar with your work, Jordan, because your primary duties with The Athletic are covering the LA Rams. Prior to that, you were with the Carolina Panthers. So not a ton of crossover typically with the Colts fan base. I remember seeing you at Lucas Oil Stadium, though, a few years ago, and have been such a fan of your work ever since. So it's just such an incredible opportunity to get you on the official Colts podcast to now talk about the 15th overall pick.
Yeah, I'm so excited for the crossover. Obviously, I've followed the Colts for a long time. I was a big Andrew Luck fan when he came out as a West Coast girl. And Stephen Holder, Zach Kiefer, James Boyd, all favorite people and colleagues and former colleagues of mine. So I was so happy we finally got to talk. I feel like we've messaged and everything in the past. And like when we finally got to talk, it was like, well, we could just spend this entire Women in the NFL happy hour just like talking to each other, right? So
we really could have. You just put us in a corner.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Latu is an awesome person. Got to spend some time with him and his D-line coach, Ed McGilvra, at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Could not have left a better impression. So really glad to talk about him with you today.
So the title of this, and I have to tell you guys, the way this came on my radar is my good friend Ashley Adamson from the Pac-12 Network. She sent this over to me, and I was like, "Oh, it's a Jourdan piece. This is awesome." It's called "House Star Outside Linebacker Laiatu Latu Masters the Unique Craft of Pass Rushing and Why." First thing I want to ask is, with your primary focus covering the Rams and all of the demands of that, how did this story land on your radar and kind of create an opportunity to go away from that a little bit with this feature?
Yeah, well, as a part of my role too, I do special projects for The Athletic, and so him being such a big time prospect and such a really unique and really a story of overcoming a lot. He was always someone that I sort of followed. He was obviously local UCLA in the Los Angeles area. And then his D-line coach, Ed McGilvra, like he trains players up here near Westlake area, which is a little bit north of Los Angeles. And so I've known Ed for forever because he's trained some Rams players, he's trained Chargers players, he trains players from a lot of different NFL teams. So I first started hearing about this younger player, Laiatu Latu, who was kind of just going and hanging around. He wasn't really participating because he wasn't, they're doing their own off-season stuff for college. But he was like eavesdropping, right? And I say that in the best way. I mean, he was, some coaches, they like to call it like he was nosy. He was nosy. He wanted to know all of the little technical things that these professionals were doing. He wanted to know the different types of moves. He wanted to understand why they rushed the way that they rushed. And so he's been on my radar for a while as someone who I wanted to write about. And so it was fortuitous in Mobile. I was working on a separate project, and I happened to cross paths with Ed, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to talk to him. And luckily, everyone was able to make it happen. And I just came away from that conversation really feeling like, this is a young man who has it, right? And definitely a franchise player.
Interesting that you guys are both out in California, but it took like Mobile, right, to like bring you together. Isn't that like how like the NFL works? Well, Coach Ed also works with Kwity Paye. Kwity was one of the first people to reach out to Laiatu when he was drafted. So Ed is very highly respected, very well regarded among NFL circles. Our defensive line coach, Charlie Partridge, has just raved about him. You talk about Laiatu having it. What kind of is that factor that kind of in spending more time sold you on that and was really evident that he has not only the ability that we saw at the college level, but that can translate over to the NFL as the Colts hope it does and hope it immediately does so?
Yeah, I think we all know from watching his tape, obviously, and watching him play in college, that he's got every pass rush tool in the bag already. That's not always enough, though. It's about how you combine things, how you sequence things. There's so much creativity that goes into building a rush plan. It's not just using one move over and over and over again, unless you happen to be the most gifted presence on the field ever. And some people do, they have preferred moves.
And you've watched Aaron Donald, so...
Yeah. And like, but Aaron, the thing that's really cool is actually, Laiatu and I really had a great conversation about Aaron, because watching Aaron Donald and combining some of the hand moves that Aaron Donald does, some of the chop and swipe moves, combining it with some of the footwork that he was watching from professional basketball players, James Harden being one of them, I wrote about it in the story. They were basically trying to just different ways of creating leverage and different movements. And I knew that Laiatu was very passionate about football and passionate about, pass rushing in general. You don't come back from what he came back from if you don't have this like absolute love and joy for the game. But sitting down with him, it really reminded me of talking to people well beyond his years. I've been fortunate to cover a lot of really outstanding, great pass rushers in my career so far. And the way he talked about the craft of the game, the way he talked about the artistry, the creativity, it really came off like he was painting a picture with his pass rush, and the meticulousness with which he approached like every minute little detail. It really was, it was fantastic. It was beyond his years. And so because he reminded me so much of some of those conversations that I had with pros who still took time, always had it in them, but took time to develop some of that technical stuff and really have that broader sense for the game, that artistry sort of painter and canvas mentality. He has it now. And I think that that's really cool. And I couldn't be more excited for him.
I'm stealing a line specifically out of your article right here. Every detail offers a potential rush scenario, a collection of moves from which Latu will select and then craft into combinations like a painter selecting swipes of color for his palette before turning to the canvas. So great writing, just like great pass rush, all comes from details. And some of the really interesting details that I read and learned from your piece were the anticipation of the pre-snap movement. What was it that stood out to you as some of the elite dynamics for him, even before he moves, and how he evaluates these offensive linemen that he is preparing to attack?
Yeah, it's you're studying body contours, basically. You're studying usually from a lot of deep tape work before. You're looking at the way that the lineman you'll be facing, or multiple linemen, if I assume they'll be moving him around because the kid can do everything. But you're studying their tendencies, you're studying the way that they set. What does their elbow do when they pass set, with if it's a 5-step drop? What if it's a run play, what does their base do? Where do their knees go? Like what do their hips do? And it's for him and for really great pass rushers who are pass rush specialists, it's all about finding ways to work those leverage points and those body contours and those different tendencies and learn them on the fly and build with different sequencing of moves and then flip that against them. And I think what a lot of times people don't get right about pass rushing is they think it's okay, you rush and then you rush again and then you rush again. And like, if you're 1 for 4, then that's bad. Really, 3 of those 4 rushes could be setting up the 4th rush. And that's what is really important. It's a chess match within the chess match within the chess match. And the really, really great ones study those tendencies. They don't get buried by them. They don't get, overwhelmed by the amount of information, but they really study and try to think of different combinations and sequences that can eventually turn those things they see on tape and that they feel in the course of snap to snap movement, eventually turn those against the player that they're playing against.
It's incredible. It's like physics meets chess meets, everything in how you're trying to manipulate all of these different facets. And in spending some time and getting to talk with him a little bit about the injury, and people are very well aware of his story now, how do you see that has possibly either prepared him to maybe, one, not take anything for granted, or this is almost something that he has already faced so much adversity early on in his career and had to overcome it, that now the inevitable adversity that he is going to face over the course of a 17-game NFL rookie season at that position, not that anything is just going to be easy, but that some of these struggles and some of the adversity are actually going to be, in the long run, a really good thing potentially for his NFL career.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I know everyone who watches him play, who meets him, whoever interacts with him, just wants him to be healthy for the long haul. And it's really cool to see him return the way that he has. I think that, like, in talking to him, one of the things that I kept thinking about was, here's this young person who is coming and doing this job interview basically for months, right? It's like a months-long job interview. And the thing that people most are asking him about most, and rightfully so, because you have to vet the prospect, is something that he couldn't control. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I started thinking about, okay, well, what elements of his life does he control? And it starts with the pass rush, obviously, but it also broadens into the amount of work he's put into this game and this sport and this craft. And that was something that really shone through. He understands what it feels like to have no control over losing the thing that you love. And then when you get it back, what are you going to put into it that you can control? Understanding that in life, the uncontrollable could happen to you. But if you're showing up again and again and again, snap in, snap out, and you're doing the work and you're throwing yourself into the thing that you love with full passion and energy, then you might have the odds on your side in the end, and you'll never regret putting in that work. And that is, again, he's much younger than I am, but very much taught me a lesson from that conversation. And I'm grateful for that, because it was incredible perspective from somebody so young. But again, he is a product of the life he has experienced.
And I mean, that's something I feel like we should all, take to heart and like be reminded of, right? Like, I need that. Like, I need this, young person, early 20s, fresh out of UCLA, kind of helping me embrace that even more so. And one of the things that Latu said when he was here for his media availability, his introductory presser, he was asked, "What are your interests outside of football?" He said, "None." I mean, we know he has a background in rugby. In fact, right away to start the week, we see the clips from Coach Ed where he's right out back working on his craft. He's back at it this week before coming to Indianapolis for rookie mini camp. Is that accurate? No interests outside of football from what you were able to gather in the time you spent with him and his coaches at UCLA and Coach Ed as well?
I mean, we only talked about football. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Because what are your interests outside football? You would also say none. It's it.
Yeah, it was just two football nerds, I think. Yeah. So I think, but really though, I mean, huge passion for his family. If you ask him about his family, he'll probably talk for hours, because he has so much care and compassion for them and wants to set them up in their lives as well, and certainly took on that role at a younger age. So it's very cool. The bond he has with his mom is awesome as well. So I think it's really just family and football with that guy.
Because his mom too, she was here with him as well as his siblings. She was really the one who had to advocate to find a doctor who would help him, who would clear him and allow him the opportunity to continue his football career, correct?
Yeah, and she fought for him. She fought for his dream, and it's really, you can't say it any better than that. Where she believed in him. She didn't want to see him, hurting, and she believed that he could come back just as he believed he could come back. And she was really the one who fought for his dream and kind of talked him through and helped him through some of those harder moments.
And he's regarded as the best pass rusher in the draft. Certainly among, there were that very top tier of elite pass rushers in this draft. The first defensive player to come off the board at 15 in an absolutely wild draft class. In the time that you have spent, because you talked about, you've been around a lot of top tier elite edge rushers in the NFL. I know Laiatu has spent a lot of time with Max Crosby. That's someone who he really tries to learn from. If you had to say, like, this is, you don't want to necessarily give comps or like set things too high, but if you had to help Colts fans kind of understand the type of weapon that he is in the pass rush, who would you maybe equate elements of his game to? Not specifically him as a player, but at least elements of, that pass rush skill set and what he's able to do.
Yeah, that's really tough, because I don't know that I've come across a lot of prospects who are that toolsy that early. In terms of like the arsenal of moves and the way he thinks and talks about them. But, it certainly is going to be an interesting path for him to strike out on, because he is entering the league sort of in a unique space where he is one of the pass rushers in recent memory who is coming in with that wide of a tool belt, essentially. And also the things he can do, even, in some of the 4-eye work, if they drop him a little bit. His old DB's coach and defensive coordinator was telling me, like, he moves like a corner when they're doing different drills for dropping and those types of things. So it's really hard to comp, as you know, and I don't want to put too much on him before he gets in the building. But I will tell you, the way he talked about football, and again, the attention to detail and the appreciation and understanding of like the bigger picture of football and of a pass rush reminded me of a lot of pros I've been around, some great ones and guys who really look at it at that in that way and go on to have really long careers in the league.
Something that was really interesting to me that we heard from Colts defensive line coach Charlie Partridge, he was talking with Latu and was just asking him where he learned a lot of things. And while he was going through his injury, he just studied a lot of like YouTube, like drills. And a lot of this is, self-motivated and self-taught, which is really interesting. And Coach Partridge is like champing at the bit to get his hands on this guy to work with him, because Charlie comes from such a long line of success at the college level. This is his first time at the professional level. So it really feels like, from the Colts perspective, to have Coach Partridge coming immediately out of Pittsburgh, and having a long line of guys who he'd worked with, JJ Watt at Wisconsin, and now to have a guy who has that skill set, but yet has so much opportunity for growth, along with a defensive front that set the franchise sack record this year. This should be a very exciting time to watch this Colts defense.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I mean, it's like when crazy potential meets great coaching, so much fun comes after that. So from afar, I'll be excited to see as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, what else are you working on? Give all of our Colts fans, just a preview of, following you and what you're going to be working on for the next few weeks, so that they can be in tune with all the work that you're doing across the league.
Yeah, so it will have come out by now. So as of time we were recording this, it's not yet released, but a big 2-part project about the draft, about what it's like to be in a scouting department throughout the course of a draft cycle. That is up now at theathletic.com. Put a lot of time into that and was really a cool experience. So hope everyone goes and checks it out.
Awesome. We will. I'm always sharing and retweeting your stuff, so be sure to do that as well. Jourdan, thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope it's not like another full year at the Combine until we get to chat again. Thank you for all your hard work. Admire so much what you do, and always enjoy your writing and your stories and your contributions to the phenomenal football landscape. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure. Thank you for all of your work. Huge fan of yours. We could go on and on again for another 45 minutes on this, but I really appreciate you having me on.
High motor. I mean, obviously a work ethic that this cat is.
The Euro chop.
All he's about is football. One more
For
time.
our audio-only audience, Larra just Euro chopped the microphone.
One more time with Larra Overton and her Euro chop. Here it is. Let's bring it. Well, I can't wait. What are we going to expect out of this young man this year? #1 overall draft choice of the Colts.
Hey, we're going to see it right away. I think that first and foremost, it comes in hungry. He's ready to work in complement to this group, and not just hungry to prove what he can do, but hungry to learn from the rest of this group. And that's one of the things I found really exciting is for him to, coming off of his experience in college, out of Washington, then to UCLA, to have this organization that's really invested in him. And you heard him when he arrived in Indianapolis. He kept thanking Shane and Chris, thanks for believing in me. Thanks for believing in me. This is a guy who is just so grateful. And that's something that, Jourdan emphasized in her article too. And I want to pub this for her as well. She mentions it in the interview. That article is out now, in which she was basically embedded with the LA Rams scouts for about a year preparing for the draft. So if you want a great article and kind of just a different perspective, because obviously we do it as part of Behind the Colts, and you see the perspective from our scouts. If you want to see from another organization, obviously the Rams have a very different approach, to the draft and what they have done in recent years. So that article, actually a 2-parter, that's out now if you want to follow that as well.
Well done by you. Great job
Thanks.
on that inside look, and more to come. Obviously, all the latest and greatest information at Colts.com. What can I expect, or what can we expect in your eyes out of Latu as a rookie?
I think you want to see. We talked about it a little bit last week, with the sack totals of if he gets 7 or 8
who
sacks.
Who knows, though, right? I mean,
yeah,
who,
but
who knows?
I think you want to see that kind of like I was just talking about. You want to see him contribute to the pressure rate going up, and you're affecting quarterbacks more frequently.
Do you see more blitzes?
Well, what I want to know with Latu is, because he has experience kind of playing all over in different ways. He's different than a Taekwon Lewis or a Dio Odangbo, where they'll kick inside on third down. He can play in this sort of this spinner role where he's lined up in a 2-point stance, so just on his 2 feet over a guard, and he can rush the guard that way. You kind of see the Browns do it with Myles Garrett, where you get a little bit creative in how you can deploy this guy because he has such a different skill set. That's going to be an interesting thing for Gus Bradley to potentially use if he wants to be creative with that rushing 4, where, okay, maybe we're not sending more blitzes, but let's get a little creative with how we use Latu, sprinkle him in over a guard, over a center, lined up in different ways to try to generate different kinds of pressures with that 4-man rush.
The defensive future is bright. Guys, thanks for sitting down. Let's talking about this. Obviously, Colts.com will have the latest. These two will be all over the rookie minicamp, hearing from the rookies for almost the first time, and a lot on Latu and AD like we talked about. But great job on Behind the Colts. When can we expect the another episode out of that?
Coming up in a few weeks. It is in progress.
In progress?
So it is in progress.
Great
so
behind-the-scenes
we will update you, and so we have actually a couple that we are pursuing that are in the works, and we will work on the strategy on how we're releasing those very, very soon.
Double J, we're going to look forward to a great piece that you've put a lot of time and effort into. I think it was a June release about the Colts move from Baltimore to Indianapolis.
Yes, that'll be on the Colts Audio Network. We're targeting a end of June release for it, and it's essentially just telling the story of why the Colts are here.
Yep.
Because I think we know all the images of the Mayflower trucks pulling up and all that, but I didn't know the full story of how the Colts left Baltimore, why they left Baltimore, the political intrigue of why they left Baltimore, and then the political intrigue of how the city of Indianapolis built a dome without a tenant.
It's a great story, and he's going to bring that to you.
Yeah.
JJ, I know you do a lot of writing, not so much with this anymore, but on your computer, and you're going nonstop this time of year, even though we're in the off season. So well done, and obviously follow him along at JJ Stankevitz, at Larra Overton. I'm Jeffrey Gorman. Guys, I appreciate it. Have fun at the rookie minicamp. We're going to hear from you this weekend, as well as a bunch of other rookies. Be safe, and can't wait to hear your Kentucky Derby stories next year. So I know you'll be going.
That's right.
You'll be going back. All right, guys, that's it for now. The official Colts podcast. We'll talk to you next week.